So, welcome to the 2020 Schnitger Academy. We started last year with this very special program and the opportunity to work in depth with the unique organ in Örgryte New Church, built in the 17th century North German tradition. It has all the tonal resources, 4 manuals, the quarter comma mean tone temperament, the sub-semitones, the wind supply, the key action, everything is there that is so essential to sense and understand and render and get inspired by playing the wonderful repertoire. And this summer we focus on Matthias Weckmann, the point of departure, and the composer whose this organ in some ways actually was built to really match his music and what we know of registration practice and so forth. And Dietrich Buxtehude. Buxtehude is a composer where we know almost nothing about how he registered his music. We know that Johann Sebastian Bach went in 1705 to Lübeck to listen to the way Buxtehude played. And we think that what he wanted to know was particularly how it sounded. And very important part of that is the registration. So we will together explore the music by Weckmann and Buxtehude from August 9th through August 15th. So a complete week, and we invite a limited number of interested people to come so that we can really get time to practice, not only to play and have masterclasses, but also time every day at both the organ here and the second mean tone organ that we have in Göteborg in the Haga Church, built by John Brumbo. So these 2 instruments will be used, and also keyboard instruments, clavichords with sub-semitones, and we'll have a combination program both for a class of participants who have substantial experience working with this repertoire, playing historical organs with short octaves and things of this kind. So 10 participants that have this kind of background and interest. And then we'll also have a junior academy for 10 very interested, talented, but perhaps not yet experienced with this type of instrument. And we'll have concerts and performances and a wonderful time together. So we look forward to receiving your application. And because of the circumstances this year, we'll have a very late registration date so that you can make your final choice according to the developments in Corona times. But also remember, it's never a disadvantage to register early. We'll take that into consideration also when we choose our participants for the Arp Schnitger Organ Academy in Gothenburg in 2020. You heard music by Matthias Weckmann, a 17th century organist whom we know particularly for his importance in Hamburg as the organist of St. Jacob's James Church. And he created magnificent organ music that had particular tonal colors that he used as idiomatic orchestration for his way of playing, for example, an organ setting like we heard now, with the cantus firmus in the tenor. Es ist das Heilungskommen here, the last verse of this choral cycle, where he said in annotations in the tablatures that here you should play the cantus firmus both in the manual and in the pedal, simultaneously with which creates a doubling of the cantus firmus, that we hear it a little bit more loud and then also with transparency and clarity that is required in this full-voiced setting. The very interesting thing that we're going to spend time working with here in the Schnitger Academy in August this year is these registrations, the original registrations that we know from his music that he composed for. And that makes the organ music by Weckmann a very important point of departure for our connection to the 17th century Hamburg tradition of organ composition and the way of developing musical thoughts to be rendered with sounds of an organ in the context of liturgy and Orthodox Lutheran musical thinking of that time. And the organist was seen as an organ preacher. And there is one such registration that comes down to us from 3 independent sources. It's a very detailed description in one source by a student of Weckmann, Johann Kortkamp. He was the son of a colleague of Weckmann who studied together with him in the 1630s in Hamburg for Jacob Praetorius. And there is a quote which is very interesting, which I take from my dissertation, the interpretation of Matthias Weckmann's organ music, and the textbook here, where we can read about Weckmann and how he learned organ playing and the tradition of playing in Hamburg with Jacob Praetorius from assisting him. As it says here, standing behind his back. When he played, I stood behind him and I drew the registers which he requested. Also, if I wanted to know, for instance, how Jacob Praetorius, my teacher, had played, he would play the chorale, or in a Vesper a Magnificat, or on the Sunday a psalm, so that I listened with great interest and shed joyful tears. Afterwards, he would explain his thoughts and ideas, and through this process, he educated me. So it's a very interesting personal perspective view of how you studied, how you worked as an apprentice, and how you assisted during organ playing as well. So there was this possibility to choose and set the orchestrations, the registrations between, or sometimes maybe even within the playing. And there's another dimension this with the sounds, which I think we can sense when we listen to the sounds in this organ, that they evoke emotions and certain affects. And this was also something that was taken into consideration by the organist. So it was not just making sure you heard the melody, you could recognize through a preludium, but also that the atmosphere of the particular character of the Sunday was set by the choice of registration and playing. And this was intimately connected. And there is actually a description of that also in the Kortkamp Organistenchronik, the chronicle about the organist's life and as he experienced it. And he says, Matthias Weckmann used to tell him that like the preacher, and this is what he talks about as an organist, like the preacher, his teacher, Jacob Praetorius, also could awaken and move the hearts of the congregation with his organ playing. So when he played, for example, a repentance hymn, like Erbarm dich, mein O Herrgott, how devoutly and prayerfully did he play. How well did he know how to use the individual qualities of the organ's registers in such a way that one must admire not only the playing but also the organ. It is possible to describe with what joyfulness he decorated the feast days with his organ playing. My father Jacobus Kortkamp, so this is Johann Kortkamp telling this, his father, my father, he says, Jacobus Kortkamp, may he rest in peace, like my honored master Matthias Weckmann, also learned from Herr Praetorio, and all throughout my youth recounted and recommended me that I follow in the path of this method. So interesting perspectives, but I also tell this because there's always a discussion when we have a few registration indications. What do they represent? Was it just the choice of one day? What I suggest, based on fragments of information, but very personal and clear, such things connected to these organists, is that some of these registrations probably were the key for the main functions and ideas of how to use the organ in rendering of text through organ playing like an organ preacher. And this registration that seems to have been the most important for chorale fantasias, that is what I tend to call the Praetorian, Jaco-Praetorian registration. And that is the solo in the Oberwerk with trumpet, sync, flutes 4, Nasat 3, and Gemshorn 2. That's explicitly mentioned when Beckmann did his organ audition, that he picked these stops like his master used to do. And in the middle part, so you have that for the solo, you have the principal 8 and the octave 4. Or like in the Lüneburg tablature, where it's mentioned in abbreviated form, that schwache Stimmen. So principal 8-4, and in the pedal, that's a big surprise. And when I started studying Beckmann's music, I thought this must be a mistake, or I was so curious to be able to hear this somewhere. And it was very hard to find an organ that had these sounds. But that's what we have here now, and that's what we are so excited about sharing. That's the full reed plenum with the posaune, with the trumpet 8-4 and cornet 2, and even the 24 or the 32-foot flute stop. So a very interesting sound, Spaltklang kind of concept. And let's listen to that here now. We take the principal 8 and the octave 4 of the Rückpositiv, and then in the Oberwerk we take the trumpet and the sync. The sync starts from F. And what we can hear is that it changes color and timbre as we go. In terms of loudness, it almost makes a little crescendo, which is unusual. I mean, reed stops like a trumpet if we take the same compass from F. Weakens a bit. And the combination of these two, which was the core of this registration idea, sounds like this. So we hear the mix of trumpet and the overtone ridge together. So a wonderful mix where we hear sometimes, or in the bass, we hear more of the trumpet with a certain nasal sound of the sync, and then it shifts, and the sync really, goes in and gives with the treble ascendancy volume and balances. And to this they took the flute 4 and the Nasat and the Gemshorn 2. Very colorful, wonderful, like a cornet registration in French practice, but more with more character and a little bit louder, very rich. And the soft registration in the Rückpositiv, principal 8 and 4, and in the pedal we need to build this reed ensemble. And I think we don't take the posaune here, because this is the registration goes back to the pre-Schnitger condition, and there the posaune used to be more narrow. So we take the Dulcian 16, the trumpet 8/4, and the cornet 2. And we start playing from the very beginning of this fantasia. We are very surprised because this 4 imitation, we don't expect to hear kind of a solo, which is both a bass line and has so much light to it. In the tablature it says mit dem Kornettbass. And this is a wonderful abbreviation to describe this sound, which is both bass and treble, Kornettbass. But that's what they used, obviously. So, completely different from what we would imagine.